Hi everyone, welcome again to the Bachelor of Communication Media Industry Talks. My name's Dan, I'm the Program Manager, and yeah, I'm very happy that Stacey and Alan have agreed to come along today. This was kind of a bit of an idea that I had, partly a little bit for me to kind of put my money where my mouth is in terms of having some experience in the industry, but also it's an excuse for me to talk to Stacey and Alan about their work and their process and screenwriting and writing in general, and sort of what we claim to do when we're not being lecturers and tutors and that sort of thing. So I'll just, first of all, I'd like to acknowledge the people of the Woiwurrung and Bunurong language groups on whose unceded lands RMIT conducts the business of the, on whose unceded lands we conduct the business of the university. I'm coming to you from Woiwurrung land at the moment, and I'd like to acknowledge elders past, present, and also acknowledge elders and traditional custodians of the unceded lands wherever you're joining us today. I'd like to introduce Stayci Taylor, first of all. Stacey is a screenwriter, script editor, and story consultant whose credits include 10 seasons of a bilingual serial drama and co-creation of a primetime sitcom. She's got a screenplay or two in the bottom drawer, like I'm sure we all do, and currently works as a researcher lecturer, and she's the co-program manager of the Master of Media program at RMIT. She's the co-editor of 2 books about script development coming this year and next year, and is widely published in academic journals on the topics of screenwriting, comedy, and web series. And we'll talk a little bit about screenwriting research later on and what that entails. Alan Nguyen also joins us. Alan is an international award-winning writer and director working across TV, film, theatre, virtual reality and augmented reality, and I'm excited to talk to Alan about writing for extended realities and installations and so on. He's written scripts for the Melbourne Theatre Company, SBS, December Media, and Matchbox Pictures, NBC Universal. He's been a VR designer for a film opera. He's been an editor. He's also a composer, which I didn't know until I found this bio. So an incredibly multi-talented person. He's also a lecturer into the media program at RMIT. Some of you might know him from your studios. And for my part, I have worked as a screenwriter, producer, production manager. I've worked across lifestyle and documentary TV, corporate media and drama, and I've done all sorts of things in all those fields, working as a kind of a jack of all trades in terms of writing, directing, production managing, grabbing coffees, everything. But I've worked on a whole bunch of different things, and I recently just sort of finished a book on my filmmaking practice, and part of that is screenwriting, which we may get onto today. I wanted just to kick off by we've sort of gone through the formal bios for both of you, but I wanted to talk to you a little bit about where and how you started writing for screen media. First jobs, or what was the first sort of task that you had to do in terms of, your first blank page?
Well, I actually started out of a master's internship, and I like telling this story to students because I hope it inspires a little optimism, current climate aside. So I had come from a playwriting and theatre making background. My undergrad degree is in theatre studies. My master's degree was in film, media and television, and as part of that I did an internship at quite a small production company in Tamaki Makaurau, aka Auckland, New Zealand. And my timing was really fortunate. They had been doing a kind of a youth magazine show for a long time on the Māori television service in New Zealand, and they were developing a bilingual soap with a language acquisition focus. So the running joke was that this Pākehā intern arrived to do her 250 hours for a master's and left 9 years later. And I went in there expecting to be making coffees, and it was all hands on deck. So I cut my teeth with soap training, which I could talk about a bit later. I actually believe is really good episodic storytelling training, and had the absolute pleasure and privilege of learning Te Reo Māori as part of the process. By the end, I was able to write. I still can't speak, but I was able to write fluently in both languages. So I'm always forever grateful to that master's internship, and it was from that gig that I got my others and was able to get pictures accepted and then produced for other companies beyond.
Wow, so real sort of baptism by fire.
Yes, it was. It was. I'm speaking of it very fondly because obviously it was a terrific opportunity, but it was terrifying in parts, frustrating too. Budgets were an issue as they are anywhere, and etc. But yeah, an incredible start to my screenwriting.
Yeah. How about you, Alan?
Is there any way that we can watch that show, Stacey?
Yeah, I think Māori television is geo-blocked from here because I have tried before, but I keep thinking SBS might pick it up. Yeah, but I'll have a dig around and let you know. I also did a really strange cameo on it, which is always fun to unearth. Yeah.
Writers' cameos don't happen very
No.
For me, when I left high school, I really had my heart set on filmmaking. And so I thought, okay, I should study film and television, but my family said, no, you're not doing that. So I wasn't allowed to. So I studied something else. I studied psychology, but I was really lucky in that I had friends who had who were studying film and television. So I asked them if I could borrow the gear that they were borrowing out, and I'd shoot these little short films with friends, and just continued to make short films that way. And then did bits of theatre, and yeah, just kept making short films. And when I was recommended for a television production, I think it was just nice to have things on the CV that we could speak to. Yeah.
So you were recommended as a writer or as a sort of director, producer? Like what was the role you were recommended? Okay.
Yeah.
And the short films and stuff that you were making, that you wrote them, or you sort of, was there a bit of a collective? Or?
I mostly wrote those, but there was one that someone else wrote, and then I had my way with it.
Okay. What sort of genres were those early works?
Mostly speculative, so science fiction and horror.
Yeah,
so you haven't strayed too far from those roots.
That's right.
Yeah. And can I ask, Alan, did you, when you say that, you wrote them, did you have to teach yourself? Did you kind of, I literally interviewed someone the other day who said, I interviewed someone the other day who said we literally had to Google how to write a script. And I'm just wondering how you were self-taught or how you knew how to do it.
Yeah, the first short film that I made, it's ridiculous what I didn't know. So this is screenwriting, but just one example was I was following the actor walking around the streets, and I thought I had to take my shoes off because I didn't want the sounds of my own footsteps on the recording. I didn't, that's how little I knew on my first shot. But things like formatting or how you actually write for screen, I didn't know at all. But I think, yeah, the tools are out there to research. So things like DVD director's commentaries I really, really like and kind of miss because we don't really consume movies that way anymore. But now there's so many things like YouTube interviews with writers and filmmakers. So, yeah.
How about you, Stacey? You said you studied. Was that sort of writing formatting and screenplay layout? Was that something that was part of your studies, or was that something you picked up? Or
a little bit of both. So in my master's, it was a master's by coursework, and we were able to pick up one undergraduate subject in our kind of elective pool. So I did pick up I think it was called advanced screenwriting elective. The rest of the coursework master's was quite theoretical, feminist film theory, theories of reality television, etc. My dissertation was about my mini dissertation was about New Zealand Idol, actually, but I digress. So, to answer your question, not particularly. I did have that one with Hester Joyce, actually, who ended up at La Trobe here in Melbourne. It was a really good course, but it was just that one kind of 12-week semester or whatever it was. So, but I had worked, as I say, as a playwright. So I had, and for some reason, I used to use Final Draft for that. Somebody slipped me an illegal copy once. So I would.
An illegal copy of Final
Yes,
Draft.
indeed. So yeah. I was. Yes, it was a combination of having studied playwriting, having studied a little bit of screenwriting, but then mostly getting down and dirty with it for broadcast.
Yeah, yeah. I guess, you know, I'm sort of similar to Alan in a way, in that I kind of just, there was a bunch of us at uni that just went to the Macquarie Uni car park late at night and filmed a whole bunch of short films that didn't make any sense, really. Yeah, that's how we kind of learned continuity and learned the value of the value of the script, but also those moments where the script kind of needs to be not necessarily put to one side, but like there are moments where other crafts need to kind of come to the fore, and some of that visual storytelling perhaps needs to come through. My first paid written job was on my uni internship in third year. So I ended up working for a company called RMIT Media in Sydney, and my fourth week, so the internship was 3 weeks. My fourth week, they said, hang around 1 or 2 days a week, we'll pay you. We need you to write a corporate script for, I can't remember what it was for, but there were 4 or 5 clients a week that we were doing stuff for, and it was literally write an ad, basically. There were ads, and then there was kind of like instructional videos as well. And writing for corporates, it was different to anything I'd done in terms of writing scripts for drama or for action or whatever it happened to be, because it was an audio-visual script. And I spent a lot of time in an audio-visual script. So for those that don't know, there's screenplay format, which you might be most familiar with, which is, you know, big print, character, dialogue, repeat ad nauseum. And then there's audio visual, which is side by side. So we'd have to write the script in audio visual format, what you're seeing in the left hand column and what you're hearing in the right hand column, or vice versa, depending on who the brief was for. We'd have to write that, send it to the client. They'd come back with notes, basically throw the whole thing out and come back with what they wanted to see. And yeah, I wrote in AV for the 3 or 4 years while I was working for them. But yeah.
I had to do a bit of that too, because I also wrote the presenter links, and I didn't know what that meant.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'd be working in an AV script, and then there'd be the kind of the screenplay insert, and then the kind of, because, you know, the drama was kind of housed within a presenter, and you know, some Reo Māori lessons basically. And
Okay.
I have found since then that, you know, I learned how to do it because I had to learn how to do it, and I learned how to do it for that company and for it to make sense to them. But in teaching, I have found there are so few resources in teaching that way. And I feel like a bit of a charlatan because, you know, I did it once at one time, albeit for many years, but for that one production house. And as we know, house styles evolved, and I was on the ground floor. So I kind of was part of the evolution of it. I don't know if it's industry standard in Australia or elsewhere. But yeah, I think there's a gap with all our spare time to really explore that, you know, because it takes some getting your head around, especially if you've been writing big print dialogue and then have to suddenly go, quite literally flip and go, you know, I have to think about and if there's a voiceover as well in the third column. So yeah, it is. A lot of people find that easier than the screenplay format too. So
and it kind of tests that the supposed rule, and we might get onto some more rules in inverted commas later on, but it sort of tests that rule about, you know, keep your big print not that big, like keep it, you know, show don't tell, you know, leave, you know, sort of leave the visual storytelling as much as possible to whoever's on set if that's not yourself. But with AV scripts, you know, the client wants to know, or they'll tell you what you're seeing, so you have to make sure that you include what they're telling you that you have to show. So yeah, it's an interesting one. maybe just to whoever's here, welcome as well. Drop any questions you have in the chat, and we'll get to them later. I guess I wanted to take you to maybe let's talk. What is it that interests you about screenwriting in a kind of broader sense? What is it about writing for the screen in particular that really holds your interest? And yeah, Alan.
I think screen, as opposed to, say, novels, is that it's a combination of many different art forms that I'm attracted to. So the visual image, music, performance, costume design, all of that. And even though you're not necessarily specifying that in a screenplay, you might be dreaming that up and weaving that in broader strokes. So I think that draws me to this medium. And also, this is going to sound maybe a little bit wanky, but I think it really allows us to grapple with issues that we're thinking through about life or an aspect of society or something to do with a certain aspect of relationships. Yeah, so it's not necessarily always a direct message, but it's something that allows us to think through something. So writing it allows us to extra time to think about it.
Yeah, for sure. Stacey?
Yeah, so I'm a screenwriter and only a screenwriter. I mean, I'm not many other things, but I'm not a filmmaker, although I will argue that being a screenwriter means you are a filmmaker, if you know what I mean. But what I mean is that I'm not, unlike both of you, I don't do it as part of a fuller practice of filmmaking. I don't. I can give good videography if I have to in a social way, but really I don't have those skills, and I haven't particularly aspired to those skills. I believe there's lots of people doing that work. So it makes me in some ways unusual, because a lot of people do screenwriting as part of, as I say, that broader practice. So it means that I'm quite the screenwriting geek, especially as I've taken that from practice and into research. And I love everything about what you can possibly do within the constraints of that format on the page. I'm really interested in breaking the format. And I'm also really interested in what happens if you butt up against it and try and work within it. I really love challenging myself to use dialogue as a last resort and, see exactly what I can do with big print. I enjoy language, so I enjoy, really kind of spending far too long, getting exactly the right verb for that piece of big print so that it's only a sentence and it describes exactly what that character's doing without labouring 3 sentences worth of how they're doing it. I love all of that stuff. I kind of advocate for it as creative writing, even though it sits uneasily between a couple of research fields. And I would argue that kind of goes out, and that kind of stigma around screenwriting goes out into industry as well. But in terms of research fields, it absolutely sits somewhere between creative writing research and screen production research. And often I will, just as an example, I will go to a conference for either of those things and I'll be the outlier both times. And then I'll go to a Screenwriters Research Network conference with geeks like me and go, yeah, there's a reason we should only meet once a year. So I think there's so much, if you enjoy, it's a weird thing, because even though quite rightly screenwriters would be told all the time the word is not the point, the word is just the means by which we then get to the screen, and I completely agree, otherwise what's the point? But somewhere before that happens, somewhere in the pre-production period of the writer writing the script and the people that help develop scripts, there is language. There is language on a page that absolutely helps a director or a client or a producer or any other stakeholder in the process be able to see something because you made the perfect sentence that helped everyone understand who that character is, or what that world, what that aspect of the world is, what that detail of the world is.
Yeah, I think I'm probably somewhere in between, because I adore language and I love, again, like you say, Stacey, trying to find that perfect word. I also think that if something has a really strong script, and if someone's laboured over words before they get to the screen. I think you can, I don't know, I think you can tell, you can sort of feel that there's been love and labor put into something, and then it was almost kind of a gift to the director or the filmmakers to sort of then have the job of honoring. It's a very romantic sort of view of screenwriting, is kind of this take this gift that we have bestowed upon you and bring it to life and all that sort of thing. But then I also sort of like what Alan said there around you're writing a blueprint. Effectively, you're writing something that in very rare circumstances it might just be yourself. You're writing for yourself, you go and film it yourself, but most of the time you're going to be working with other people, so you're writing a blueprint for a collaboration of a sort. And I think that's a really interesting skill to try and master. I think it's a strange craft.
It is a really strange craft, and the blueprint analogy is pervasive, but it's slightly misleading because it implies that it will be applied exactly. Like if I understand blueprints correctly, if you don't kind of abide by every kind of measurement, the building will fall down.
Yeah,
whereas I as a precious writer, I'm not going to lie, I would wish that my screenplays were treated more like blueprints, but I think maybe a recipe is maybe a slightly better analogy, because it implies that, I don't know, I'm going to try and take this further, that the ingredients are all there, but if somebody does add, reduce the, I'm out of my league, but, reduce the spice and add this condiment, that the spirit of the food group will still be there.
Yeah. Wow. How many metaphors can we get in?
You can quote me on this.
I guess I wanted to move into, dare I say, craft process. The screenwriter's, I guess, worst nightmare or dream is a blank page with the blinking cursor. I guess, how do you get started on a new project? And I'm using new project. We might split it up into something that you're sort of a passion project that you're into yourself, or whether it's a provided job, a writing job. How do you start? Do you start in writing software? Do you start with a mind map? Like what happens? How do you get going, Alan?
I think for me, something that I really, really enjoy is collaborative writing. I've done a lot of solo writing, and I find that when I have a writing partner, it's a lot more fun. So the process can be more enjoyable. And a lot of it, before we actually start doing keystrokes, we talk a lot. So that can, I think in a way it can save time, because you might not be writing pages and pages of stuff that later on you might think, oh, this is actually not on point, or it's not the most useful way of getting this information across, or it's not the most emotional way of handling this scene. Talking things through, I think, and even if you're not working with a writing partner, I think just chatting through your ideas with anyone who will listen to you. So Paul Schrader, who wrote many screenplays, Taxi Driver and Raging Bull, he just goes out, and while he's waiting for coffee, he'll talk to a stranger next to him and say, hey, I'm working on this story. I hope you don't mind if I run it by you. And he does that a lot, and it just allows him to understand. I don't think the takeaway is to try and please everyone. I don't think that that's what we should be doing when we're doing that, but it's useful to understand how your ideas are coming across to others, and just by articulating it, sometimes we're hearing that as well, and we are understanding, okay, that idea is maybe worth pursuing on the page. Yeah, so I think that's a big thing that I've adopted over time.
Stacey?
Yeah, I completely agree. My first response to your question was going to be, oh, if somebody could tell me, because I'm not a classic starter. I've got a lot of endurance, and I'm really good at seeing a script home when all the other collaborators have gone, yeah, no, I'm out. And I've worked with a writing partner a lot. She's also my partner, so that makes us some interesting household moments, but that's a whole other story over a beer. But she's really good at beginning because she just can't stand the blinking cursor. So she's
Right.
like, we'll just start, and I'm like, oh, I want to think about it for another 9 years, and and sit in the procrastination kind of dark playground of unending leisure for a very long time. But there's a reason, I agree, Ellen, and that's the reason why writers' rooms exist. And that, of course, when I was a writer for hire, I didn't have the luxury of kind of angsting. We just had to get on with the show, and getting on with the show meant sitting around and talking. And I think this is why writers possibly have a bit of a bad rep sometimes, because it seems to be that's not really working. But you just can't get going until you have kind of created the energy around the idea, and then started also, especially in episodic storytelling, starting to nut out some of the logics of it. And then you're on the whiteboard. I still use a whiteboard now. And then you break it down by story beats and by scenes. All of that training has been so helpful, because then by the time you get to the real blinking cursor, because the real blinking cursor is, as an interior kitchen, day one, you're kind of done so much of the work. And I just couldn't agree more with Ellen in terms of that collaboration thing is the pleasure of it. I've done a bit of stuff alone. In fact, I'm about to start a short screenplay for something. I've been avoiding it for a long time because I find that difficult without people to bounce off, without kind of this idea of a place to kind of hear the idea out loud, hear it bounce off others. So getting together with other people, whether in context or not, in the context of the working environment or not, I think is essential too.
Yeah, there's a few things in there that I did want to come back to. I guess I am part of what I want to come back to is writers' rooms, because it's something that's completely alien to me. I mean, I have worked in a sort of corporate production company. You are sharing scripts, you are throwing things around, you are working with clients, but the idea of a writers' room is something beyond DVD special features, those arcane footage from old times. It's something that I don't really understand. So we'll come back to that. I guess, for me, it's I was trained on index cards, which sounds like I'm such a 1940s. Should be dead in a pool or something. But no, I was trained by the late Hunter Corday, who was a wonderful scriptwriter and teacher and script editor, and he was very, very old school. He worked at Western Sydney Uni, where I studied, and he was old school. He was he wrote everything longhand, which was kind of crazy. But he did start with index cards, and he said if you've got a trail of index cards sort of going through your house, and he said how you use them doesn't really matter. The traditional way of using index cards is to write scene description, interior, wherever it is, and then description of the scene, and then on the back you write the details of the scene, and then you just sort of lay that out and play with the order. That's one conventional way of using them. But Hunter always said it doesn't really matter how you use them. If you'd rather do it in story beats or one for the characters, or put one section of your office is one room and you put all the characters together and see what happens. It was more about sort of the possibilities, and I think that the movability of the index cards and being able to see it not on the screen, I think was something that was really helpful to me. I found that a really useful way of working. I mean, I'm kind of like your partner, Stacey, in the sense that I can't stand it for too long. I just have to start. Edit. Maybe the best thing I've learned at uni, both as a student and as a researcher, is that drafting can be really helpful. So as long as there's something on the page, you can work with it. Writers' rooms is something that's completely alien to me, and I think you've both kind of worked in situations like writers' rooms. So I guess what is one? It's a place that maybe a lot of aspiring writers will start or sort of hope to get into, or it's certainly on a lot of big productions, drama productions, particularly in Australia, soaps and stuff like that. It's kind of a way of working. So what is a writer's room? How do they work? What do they do? Stacey, do you want to start?
Yeah, so I've experienced them mostly, again, as I said, in the soap sense, in the serial drama sense, and interestingly enough, the model, the model that was developed by Grundy's for Neighbours got taught to New Zealanders, who then used it to mount our flagship soap opera Shortland Street, which has been going for 97 years and will never stop. And this is the model through one way or another that I got then taught to when we were in this writer's room for Kōrero Mai. So it's really quite, I mean, we were a much smaller team, and we were kind of making it up as we went along, so we were a bit looser with it. But the kind of the more stringent way of doing it is that, you know, a team of, say, 8 writers will meet on a Monday for all the whiteboarding. By Tuesday, you would have been assigned your storyline. So it's not broken up into episodes yet. You get assigned a storyline, and you write the story beats for, you know, this couple fall in love and then break up over the week's worth of episodes. Then you all get together, combine those, and get assigned an episode where you have some of your own story beats and many of other people's, and then you, in a kind of a virtual index card kind of way, are then putting them together into a scene-by-scene breakdown of that episode. Then, in a lot of cases with the big houses, those will go out, those scene-by-scene breakdowns will go out to dialogue writers for hire. In my case, we were everything. So then we just decide who's now taking that scene-by-scene breakdown into dialogue. So that's my experience of the kind of the industrial machine of the writer's room. And then I've also had the experience of kind of working on something which is essentially mine or mine and my co-creators, and then bringing in people to help you realize that vision a little more. So in our case, we'd be writing those sitcom scripts, but others would be jamming with us, I guess, to help us get there.
So when you say writing a storyline, that comes way before episodes, right? So
yeah,
is that like a treatment, or?
Yeah, so it's yeah, and I'm horrible at writing treatments because I don't have that much training in feature or experience. So my treatments are often when I attempt them, they're often kind of detailed in the scene, because what I understand is when you write a really detailed prose version of the scene, because the conceit is that will then go out to a dialogue writer that wasn't in the room. We were doing it kind of as a rigorous way of making sure that we didn't forget anything and that we'd make sure we'd worked out all the logics. But then we got looser with it because we realized I'm writing the script anyway. So yeah, I kind of know it. But yeah, so it's like a treatment, but I think a bit more detailed, because every single scene has its, like a good half page worth of prose that takes you in and out of that central turning point of the scene.
Stayci, when you've put together your own writers' rooms, you were mentioning you're kind of getting other people to jam on it with you. Could you speak to that a little bit more?
Yeah. So in my actual experience, it wasn't that pleasant, because it wasn't. These people were assigned to me because they were better, funnier, So it was actually quite tricky, because it was, there'd been a lot invested in the show, so there was a lot of anxieties around, making it as good as it could be. So I'm just trying to think if I've actually ever, I have once, and a lot more cautiously, had a project on the go and then thought very carefully about bringing person 3, then what do we need, bring in person 4, kind of like casting, but casting your writers for who you need, who will challenge you in the right way, or who brings something that you don't have. So I've had the experience I've had less experience of that, and I hope there's more of that in my future, and sort of more experience of here are some people to fix you, which isn't quite as fun.
Right. How about you, Alan? How does your experience differ a little?
No, I'd say it's similar. I've worked on a few shows, and they have involved brainstorming and plotting. So the brainstorming is, in a way, the coming up with the guts of the show. Someone will have had the seed idea for the show, but the brainstorming is really, it's contributing characters. So coming up with who the characters are and the major storyline. So the broader strokes, what are they? What are the character arcs? So how do the characters change in some ways over the course of the show, and that I find very fun. It's yeah, it's really creative, and you're drawing on things that have happened in your life, or things that you've read in the news sometimes. And then plotting is a slightly different phase where the show should kind of be locked off, as in we have these characters, these are the major storylines. What happens in this episode? And so it's scene one, this should happen. And there's a lot of rearranging on the whiteboard. So you'll write up the beats, and we'll realize that that's not going to work because of a logic problem or a character continuity issue. So then we rearrange it. And generally, I think with most shows, there's different storylines that are interweaving. So color code it. So you use a green for one storyline, yellow for another, and a lot of erasing and chatting through. Yeah,
it sounds like a really dynamic way of working. And sort of like, for the most part, everyone's exploring possibilities and trying new things and throwing things out there and that sort of thing.
And sharing experiences, which I forgot until Alan mentioned it. And it's colloquially called the table of pain, the table in the writer's room, because you get to the end of the week and you need another story, and eventually someone will break and share their most excruciating moment. And that's you're very right, Alan, that those are quite separate stages. The table of pain stage, and then the actual, and I agree, I find this fun too, it's almost mathematics, which I don't normally like, but the actual kind of putting it together, plotting it out, realizing that if he said this, she can't do that, that stuff can be so satisfying.
I just want to say again, if anyone here wants to ask any questions, drop them in the chat. You mentioned sort of being in it and moving things around, which kind of brings me in a kind of a roundabout way to process, which is kind of the being in the writing when things are locked off, and when you're writing dialogue and sort of the things that will, for one way or another, end up either as you wrote them or through a series of interpretations and mutations will end up on the screen. Do you have a process? Do you have a set process or a set craft? Do you have to make sure that things are just so, or is it a bit more kind of loosey-goosey in terms of just sitting down to write and making it happen? Alan?
I'm really sorry, I was distracted by reading.
Things dropping in.
Same.
Could you please repeat the question, Dan?
Do you have a process? Do you have a set sort of, do the pot plants have to be arranged in just the right way? Do you have to sit by your favorite window, or is it a bit more sort of just sit and see what happens?
Well, I'd probably say this about a lot of creative work, and that's that maybe there's a romantic idea of, when the gods touch me and then I feel inspired, and maybe it has to come at the right time. But I think discipline is underrated. I recommend this book called Daily Rituals, and it covers lots of artists, Mozart, Agatha Christie, all of these people, and all it says in each chapter is what they did, what time they woke up, what did they do next. And so many of them woke up early, had breakfast, coffee, and then just started working. And that really surprised me, because it challenged my notion of what an artist is, or what do they do. So I think there is definitely an element of just pushing through, just doing it, even if you don't feel like it. And I think one thing that can help is also just knowing that you can always you can't always rewrite, but the first thing that you write on the keyboard isn't the thing that you're going to submit or film. So yeah, just getting something, as you were saying before, Dan, that you can edit is really freeing.
Yeah, I'm really hopeless at that. And I think the whole thing about craft, and I'm such a work in progress, and I welcome thoughts on this actually, is that kind of balance between applying a discipline so you get something done, and kind of being attuned enough to the way you work. So for example, we've talked a lot about planning in the session so far, and because of my experience on the scope, I've talked a lot about it. But I'm also a really big advocate for those writers who just go, just head up, you know, interior kitchen day and just go. And you know, Nicole Holofcener, who's a director, writer in Hollywood, she will always say, look, I've tried to do that planning thing. She will argue it's a masculine way in, you know, she's tried to do the thing with the index cards and the treatment and the stuff, and she finds that she just has to get into the screenplay document. And I like to tell students that, because I think if you're in a kind of a hardcore screenwriting program, we don't really have that here at RMIT so much. You will often get told that, you know, the only way in is through this planning. And I'm still on the fence about whether that's true or not, but I do really, really believe that there's so many different ways in, and as long as you find yours and you do it with some kind of regularity, then really that's all that matters, you know. And I'm a chronic procrastinator, as I said before. I find it very, very difficult to start. I'll find all sorts of reasons why I can't possibly write until I've vacuumed. You know, just know it about yourself, apply a bit of self-compassion to that, have a laugh at yourself, and find a way to trick yourself into doing it. It's like getting on the yoga mat. I'll do it for 5 minutes. You only have to do it for 5 minutes. Just whatever it takes, whatever mind games you have to play with yourself. And the other thing is that I'm really bad with the vomit draft, and I know this. I know that so many screenwriters that I really, really respect, and so many screenwriting teachers I really respect, will say, just do it, just get out that first draft. It'll be horrible. Don't expect anything in first draft. I can't. I'm scene 2 and I'm back in scene 1 and I'm fixing, and I'll crawl my way to the end. But like I say, at least I have the endurance to do it. So I don't think my way is right. I think I could learn a lot from making myself just one day write a vomit draft that makes me sick, kind of literally. Yeah, I can't. I write, edit, refine, write, edit, refine. It's just the way I've worked it out. So just find your way, but also know yourself well enough to know when you're tricking yourself into not doing it.
Yeah.
What about
you? I was just going to say, there's so many different ways of writing and being a writer and working. You know, as you both said, you know, try everything. Find a way that kind of works for you. For me, it used to be 11:30 at night in my 4x4 room on campus, just writing whatever came into my head. That used to be how I worked, and now it's much more whenever I have the time. You know, it's just one of those things where if you have other priorities, you need to sort of squeeze in your passion and find time for that. So it is genuinely whenever I have the time. I'm aware that it's coming up on 20 past and we have some questions. It kind of makes me think maybe we should do this again sometime. But I do want to sort of move on to those. I'm going to adapt one of the questions because it was going to be one of the questions that I kind of finished up with. I'm going to adapt Courtney's question here. She's put in, what tips would you give for those who are interested in moving into screenwriting and filmmaking? I guess I wanted to ask a question that I ask in most industry talks, change up Courtney's question a little bit, which is, you know, are there any skills or things that students or aspiring writers should practice, should learn about, should read, should know, should watch, you know, if they are looking to kind of make a career or a kind of dedicated passion out of writing for the screen? Alan?
I think it depends on what you want to get out of it, but I think, say if it's narrative film and television that you're looking at getting into, I really recommend doing some theatre because it's cheaper. It really, all you need is some people who are willing to act and to get up on a stage and say your words. And you learn a lot from it because that idea of getting a sense of how things are playing out, you might be sitting with the audience and seeing if things are being understood, if they are laughing, if they're gasping, or whatever that you're trying to make them feel. You can get a sense of that. And even before it goes in front of an audience, you might have a table read with the actors, and then you can discuss things with them and say, or just get them to ask questions and figure out, are things clear? And then through the rehearsals as well. I think generally theatre versus film and television. Because of the nature of it, film and television, often things get cast and then there's the table read, and very soon after that they start shooting. Whereas in theatre, the table reads and the rehearsals can be a part of the process. And yeah, so that might be with you and some friends who like making things, just doing those table reads and getting it up in front of some people. There's lots of places, if you're in Melbourne, when we open up, to just put small scenes up. And I guess the equivalent of that now is also social media. So just making little short videos and putting them up on YouTube or TikTok, and just to start doing it. Yeah, and finding your voice that way as well.
Specifically for screenwriting, the read screenplays. Read screenplays. Like, I've got some writing books up here, but I wouldn't even necessarily recommend them so much. They're good to dip into and out of if you need to solve a problem. But reading screenplays and do your best to find ones that are actual shooting scripts. I'm about to say something redundant, sadly, but the RMIT library actually has a really great collection of them. There's a series called the New Market Shooting Script series, and they're the actual scripts, and then they kind of come with some supplementary material, and they're quite nicely produced. But there's also some kind of stapled together A4 shooting scripts from sets that are kept, I believe, in the Carlton Library, or used to be before it all burnt down. But also sites like Daily Scripts and Simply Scripts. Avoid anything, of course, it's clearly the transcription, although I really admire those people that just sit and transcribe a whole film. Oh my God. But they're not helpful to you. It's finding out how the screenwriter or that screenwriter adheres to the rules. Most of them break them. By the time you actually get your hands on a shooting script, everything your screenwriting teacher taught you has been broken, and you think, well, they know nothing. But yeah, read them. It's the way. Steal turns a phrase. Go, oh, that's how they go in and out of a montage. Oh, right, now I see how you can show a phone call. You know, I think that is the best training ground for screenwriting. I can't speak to filmmaking. And also, just to kind of seg a bit more into Courtney's question, I recommend joining the Australian Writers Guild. It's not without its issues. That's another conversation, but it is, pay your student rego, but then it unlocks some pages on the website as to rates, the kind of rates you can expect to be paid. They have great events. They have great competitions. Maybe, Dylan, it's their competitions you entered with your TV pilot. But in terms of getting your screenplay seen, that is kind of the only way I've discovered so far as to, get your first step into getting connected to that wider community.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that by just saying, watch everything. It was the real benefit of me doing the degree that I did was that we were just exposed to all sorts of things that I would never have seen before. Watch as widely as you can. I mean, I'm a bit of a walking cliche in that I really became interested in screenwriting through Aaron Sorkin. And it's funny that you mentioned theatre, because obviously Aaron Sorkin was a playwright. And he turned me on to the idea of words as rhythm. And it's interesting, there's a whole bunch of stuff. They're reshooting an episode of The West Wing later this year to inspire people to get out and vote. And there's been interviews with the original cast, and they always said that he was a bit of a dictator in terms of the right turn of phrase and so on, but everyone appreciated the poetry and the rhythm of the writing. So I downloaded scripts, like you say, Stacey. I mainlined the whole series, watched it a few times, but then found how he wrote, how he wrote out big print, how he wrote out his dialogue, how he made people talk over each other. That was like a bit of a revelation to me in terms of having two pieces of dialogue next to each other because people are saying things at the same time. And then reading a whole bunch of other screenplays and reading documentary scripts, which was something that I never thought I'd be able to do or find or look through. Just read everything. I think that's read everything, watch everything, and find what works for you, find what you love, and try and emulate. There's nothing against, not plagiarizing, but in terms of a writing style, steal what works for you and what turns you on and all that sort of thing. Very quickly, there's a few things in here about the audience. what's an audience? How much do you think about the target audience while you're writing?
I'm happy to jump into that because it's something I used to deeply resent because I'd be having to write production bibles and pitch documents, and it was like, oh, I don't know anyone that's interested in my genius. What do you mean? Everybody's going to love my idea. I've come around to changing on that, and it's mostly due to my involvement with Melbourne Web Fest and web series more generally, because it's really helped me understand. And this kind of answers Mark's question a little bit too. It's really helped me understand how specificity of target audience means that you're going to make something incredibly accessible, which is in itself a cliche. But because of the way web series are developed, with this kind of audience-facing iterative development, that's not my phrase, it's Mike Jones's, who has spoken before in this series, has really helped me see the value of it, because it's actually about serving previously underserved audiences for a start. It's bringing a very welcome array of voices to the screen, and then that stuff, suddenly networks are looking at that stuff and going, yeah, I want a piece of it. And that's how Mark was smuggling it into the mainstream. I think that idea of just kids in a car park, how maybe their ideas are suddenly on iView and then they're suddenly commissioned. So I'm trying to answer a whole lot of questions at once, but in terms of Dylan's pilot, is there any way you can make it get together and get it made, or can you pitch it at the next Melbourne Web Fest, pitch iView, get the idea, which is a great way to get the idea in front of some industry professionals. But yeah, I'm changing. This old dog is learning some new tricks in terms of thinking a lot more carefully about my networks and what my people want to see, and we all have our people.
I was just going to build on that, sort of in response to Dylan's question about his TV pilot. One of the things that I worked with Nick Piper at RMIT Media, who's a wonderful documentary producer, and he sort of taught me a lot of stuff about storytelling and just about kind of getting it done. But he said, it doesn't really matter what the full idea is or what the full product is going to be. If you can take a little bit of it and produce that independently, and I think Mike Jones and I talked about this when we had him on the industry talk, and I'll circulate that talk again for those that are a bit more interested in sort of selling scripts and content development and story editing, which is what Mike and I spoke about. But it's, if you can take a chunk of it, a producer is probably never going to read a full TV pilot, but if you can get 90 seconds or 2 minutes of either a teaser or a scene that's sort of pretty well developed, that you think sort of sells the idea or the tone of it, they're going to respond much better to something short, sharp, and sexy than actually sit down and read a pilot. They're probably never going to do that.
I know, which is so irritating because it's a work of art.
Of course, yeah.
But it's true. You have to get some sound and vision in front of people nowadays, sadly, or not. Congratulations, by the way, Dylan, in placing in some of these competitions. That's not easy. But yeah, I think there's some other ways without putting your pilot in front of someone. Yeah.
We are rapidly running out of time. It does make me think that with all the questions that I didn't get onto and some of the questions that I'm sure others have, maybe we should do a follow-up at some point in a few weeks' time, if that suits you, Stacey and Alan.
Yeah, sure.
We didn't even get to talk about screenwriting research, but we'll do that as well. Thank you, everyone, for coming along, and thanks so much, Stacey and Alan. I will talk to you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Good to chat.
Yeah, great to chat.